inspiration. Through the workers' blood shall run. There can be no power greater anywhere beneath the sun. Yet what force on earth is weaker than the feeble strength of one? Our union makes us strong. Now everybody sing. Solidarity forever. Solidarity forever. Solidarity forever. Our union makes us strong. Now you're going to do the introduction? Yeah.
Well, now that you're all awake, welcome to the College of Complexes. This is our 379th meeting since we started in February 2009. We put a different speaker on every week, a different subject. They have to be for or against something, we don't care what it is. We give an hour to make a presentation. If they go over an hour, we cut them off. Anybody interrupts the speaker, we remind the interrupter, we listen only one fool at a time. That's one of our rules. And then we have questions and answers from the audience of the speaker, not speeches. Then we have remarks, rebuttals. Everybody in this audience that wants to gets 5 minutes at the podium here to respond to the speaker said for or against. And our speaker gets the last word, gets a comment to close the meeting. That's how it works. But before we introduce our speaker, we have time for announcements. So anybody has announcements they want to make, now's the time. Any announcements? Who was it that was talking about?
Well, announce the picnic.
Someone want to announce the picnic for Saturday, Monday.
Gene, you want to announce the picnic?
I'll do it when I get
Yeah,
up there.
he'll get up there when he gets up here. Anybody else? No? All right. You want to make it? Jim wants to make an announcement. Go ahead.
I'll have it for 2 or 3 weeks.
Oh, go ahead.
I'll do the usual. Well, we're so glad to have you guys here tonight. And we're treated to have Gene come over and speak with us again tonight. Dr. Lantz always gives us some wise words of wisdom. So I know you can tune into him and get some good out of it. Those of you who come all the time have heard all the normal spiels that Tom gives out when he opens up, and same with me. But I'll just repeat this tonight. We appreciate Ramos, who has us over here, and we're able to keep our participation to $3 a head to buy the speaker's meal and pay for Tom's printing and that sort of stuff. Most of it. We don't pay for all of it. I can't get him to charge us anymore though, so you guys are getting off the hook. So I know he comes around and collects it, and you guys are very good about paying it. The other thing I would tell you is, since the restaurant does not charge us a meeting room fee, we're expected to buy a meal. So please do get something off the menu, and please take good care of our servers. The gal comes in and takes care of a whole mob of us at one time, and we appreciate that. Daughters of the owner, so they're not strangers in the dark. So, what we do in here, I'm sure gets through to Daddy, if it's extra good or if it's extra bad. So anyway, take good care of them. I know most of you are fully aware of that and know to do it. If any of you are not regulars, then those words are to follow in your ears tonight. But again, we're glad to have you here. We have good food coming. We have good talk coming to us, and we'll have a good opportunity to ask some questions and make some of our great words of comment ourselves, right? So without further ado, I will set it down and carry on, Tom.
Any other announcements? I guess that's about it.
Okay, do an update on gasoline, see if anybody knows.
Does anybody have an update on gasoline?
Huh? Anybody know? What?
anybody know?
The racetrack just opened up a few minutes ago.
It did?
Where are they?
Right down the
Down the
street.
street, they're just north of here.
Okay,
Racetrack
so they're getting gas.
That means you get home anyway, so.
Wow. What was that about? It's been close by now.
I got gas yesterday, but I had to get high test gas in order to do anything ahead. Next week, September 9th, Pat O'Connell's going to talk about can we really manifest peace in 2017. That's it's on your itinerary. I'm not going to read all this. September 16th, John Beasley, he's sitting right here. He'll be our speaker. He's going to talk about I'm considering center-right notions. That'll be interesting. It's on September 16th. That's on your itinerary also. Again, I'm not going to read all this. September 30th, how families can suffer fewer losses as a result of heart disease. That's a
Put your glasses on.
Dr. Robert Edmondson will be speaking about that, and it should be good. So I'm just letting you know what's ahead of us. Anyway, our speaker tonight is Gene Lantz. He's the president of the United States of Retired Americans. He's going to talk about Labor Day, past, present, and future. I should turn this light on.
Why don't you put your glasses on?
Let me bring them. Where's the other cord? Jim, we didn't put this in.
Here.
I plugged the orange cord in, should be laying there.
Here, Tom.
here it is.
Here, put these on.
Okay, well.
Put these on.
There, got some light.
Aha.
That makes it better. Gene Lantz is the president of the Alliance of Retired Americans. He'll discuss how he is in favor of big celebrations of Labor Day and is recommitted to making the workers' movement strong. He notes from 1947 to 1995, the American Union steadily became more alienated from the rest of the working class. In 1995, with the changes in leadership of the AFL-CIO, unions shifted directions so that today major union leaders demand that all unions turn outward towards the community at large. Union legislative programs are designed to benefit all workers, not just a narrow slice of union members. Gene notes, for example, the major campaign of the AFL-CIO during August 2013 was to mobilize support for immigration reform. And prior to 1999, the AFL favored deportations. He argues that this turn toward the broader working class is not a simple, non-inconsequential matter. Gene further argues that everyone should get behind this because it's the only way it will work, and it has to work if there's to be a bright future for Americans. So without further ado, please give a very, very warm welcome to Gene Lantz, the president of the
I'll finish off your food for you.
Just trying not to fall down.
I'll have the wires.
Do we have more seats, or do you want to open up? Can we open up, Tom?
I don't know.
There's one here.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
There's some more here. Would you like
Over
to
here.
come up here? Yeah, otherwise I'll ask.
What's two right here? There's one over, two over here.
Okay, thanks. Sorry to come in late.
That's all right.
Okay.
The main thing is you're here.
Yeah, there's somebody sitting here. Yeah, these two are, wait, these two are good. You can even face forward and get to see Gene. Okay. All right?
I don't need to see you.
You don't need to see.
These are some of my fellow Cliffies come up here.
Go ahead.
Okay.
Where do you want? Where the corner seat?
As Tom said, my name is Gene Lantz. I've been here a few times, so you're probably tired of me if you've been coming for some time. I am on the board of my union, which is the UAW Auto Workers Union out in Grand Prairie. It used to be quite large, and now it's quite small. Where it used to be the LTV plant. And I'm also the president of the retirees out there, and I'm also the editor. And I'm also on the board of the Dallas AFL-CIO, and I'm on the board of the Texas AFL-CIO. And Bonnie, raise your hand. Bonnie and I are on radio every Saturday at 9 o'clock on KNON, which is Gene Soslow's station. And that's Gene Soslow. So Bonnie and I are kind of engaged in trying to get out labor's message. Just this year, in addition to everything else that we do, I started a speakers bureau for the Dallas AFL-CIO so that we can try to get speakers out into the schools and the colleges and the churches. So if you know of anybody that wants a labor speaker, we have them, and we're promoting the idea of getting labor's message out, because labor's message is not the first thing you hear every morning. In fact, you don't hear it at all. Everything that you hear, everything that you see, every movie, every TV station, every radio broadcast, every book was either written by the bosses or approved by them. There are very, very few exceptions. And our little radio program is one of those very few exceptions. In the announcements, I failed to announce that the Dallas AFL-CIO Labor Day breakfast is Monday at 8:30 in the morning. Costs $35, but we're not making any money out of it. Actually, it costs us that much to get a big room. I'm proud to say that I believe this is going to be the biggest one we've ever had. I think we're finally going to go over that 500 mark, because they had 468 tickets sold on Friday, and there are still people there's still people calling. So I think we're going to finally get over that 500 mark, and it'll be the biggest.
On Lamar, at a ranch.
Now,
Where is it at, Gene? It's on Lamar.
it's at Eddie Dean's Ranch.
Yeah.
I've forgotten the exact address, but it's 900 Lamar.
Okay, Lamar.
It's like you go out past the convention center on Lamar, out that way. Yes, ma'am.
And it's right by the a Dart Stop Convention Center.
There's a Dart stop.
I mean, the convention, it's a train stop, the blue or the red.
I see.
At the convention center, so, and it's just right there. So it's easy on public transportation.
Great. They're not going to have all the parking problems that they had last year. After that one's over, the Tarrant County picnic starts at 11. And that'll be at 98 West Hurst Boulevard in Hurst, which is where the auto workers have a hall for the people that work at Bell Helicopter. And that was free. At 12 o'clock on Monday, the Democrats have theirs. And for some reason I remember that address. It's 4930 Military Parkway. And that one's free, and it's indoors. And all the candidates will be there. Nearly all the candidates will be at the one at the Labor Day breakfast. And the reason that the candidates are getting around labor so completely is because actually we've been a lot more effective lately than we used to be. And so the candidates know that. And they're coming around. We had a little picnic last Saturday at the State Employees Union Hall, and it was, the candidates had to wear buttons to keep from campaigning with each other. I mean, it was thick with people, especially the judges running for offices. And it's a year until the election, but a lot of political people are going to be around labor, and they're going to be at the Labor Day breakfast. Which brings me to what I want to talk about, labor history. In past times, in past presentations, I've talked about the whole picture of labor history, from the time that Moses freed the slaves up until recently. But I only want to emphasize tonight 2 periods of labor history for your interest. The first one is right now. We are making history right now. And it's not just way off somewhere, it's in Dallas. Dallas has people coming from around the country to see what's happening in Dallas and to try to find out how we do things and to copy some of the things that we're doing. The reason is because we're on the program with National. National had a big they overthrew the leadership in 1995. And the leadership had been in place for 100 years. Pretty much from 1886, when the AFL took its name, to 1995, the leadership was continuous. In other words, the outgoing leaders picked the next generation. And a lot of them spent their whole lives in office. 30 and 40 years as president. So it was a continuous leadership that was overthrown in 1995. And the leaders that took power had the traditions from the CIO rather than from the AFL. The AFL, for a long time, practiced what we call business unionism and tried to convince the bosses, that it wouldn't be so bad to cooperate with us, and if you help us, we'll help you. And that had been pretty much their attitude from 1886 right on up to 1995. The CIO, on the other hand, which was started in 1935, was an aggressive union organization that went from 0 to 6 or 8 million members just in a very few years. The difference was in how they organized. Instead of just organizing the elite workers, the ones with hard to get skills like electricians, instead of just organizing the electricians, they decided they're going to organize everybody. Instead of organizing just older men, they're going to organize women. Instead of just organizing white, they're going to organize black, they're going to organize brown, they're going to organize Asian. Which the AFL had pretty much turned its nose up at everybody that was not a highly qualified, skilled worker. So in 1935 that changed. And in 1995, the CIO part of the AFL-CIO took charge. And since then, they have been trying to implement policies that were very broad. One of the things I think that was the most striking was in 1999, whereas the AFL-CIO had always stood for deporting all undocumented workers. In 1999, they changed their tune and said, we don't want to deport them, we want to organize them. They're workers. The way to overcome problems is to overcome divisions. And so the AFL-CIO adopted a new policy in 1999. And we had a demonstration in Dallas that year. And the executive vice president of the top AFL-CIO, who was Linda Chavez Thompson at that time, came to Dallas for our demonstration for immigrants' rights. And we've been on the program for immigrants' rights ever since in Dallas. So that's why I was saying that the Dallas AFL-CIO is considerably different than the whole history of the AFL-CIO, and particularly of the AFL. So instead of kicking out the communists, which the CIO did, in 94, beginning in 1947. They don't ask anybody. They don't ask their religion, they don't ask their politics, they ask what can you do, how can you help, how can you make a difference, and it's much, much better than it was. And the period that we're in right now is one in which everyone can get involved with the labor movement. Now everybody doesn't. There's still a lot of distrust. In civil rights, for example, if you talk to all the labor people that you know and you ask them how they feel about civil rights, they'll say, we are for it and we have always been for it. And they're liars. It's not true. When Dr. Martin Luther King marched, he had very little labor support. He had some, but not much. He wrote his I Have a Dream speech in the auto workers headquarters in Detroit. That's what we claim anyway, the auto workers do. So it was, he had some support, but really not much. Today, when civil rights marches, we're out there with them. You'll see the AFL-CIO banner right out there beside Black Lives Matter and everything else. So there's going to be, for those that haven't been here before, there's a discussion period in which you can get up and tell me that I'm full of baloney, or whatever else you would want to say. But since Hobie just walked in, I just want to recognize that there are several experts here who probably know more about it than I do. So they'll get their chance in the discussion part. The other period of history that I want to talk about is because it helps us understand where we are now. As I told you, the AFL was only interested in organizing the most elite workers. They did not try to organize people that are sweeping up. They didn't organize any dishwashers. They didn't organize the telephone operators or the people that drive the elevators up and down. They wanted the railroad conductors and the electricians, the machinists, and the most elite workers that they could get. But this idea of industrial organizing had been around a while. Eugene Victor Debs was a fireman in the railroad. And he went through a strike in which, among other things, the other railroad unions scabbed on him. So when the firemen were out, and here comes the engineers and the other railroad unions that scabbed on him. So he decided to start the American Railway Union and try to organize everybody in one union. He went to jail for it. They had some success, but the government soon was very worried about them and shut them down and put Debs in prison. Then Debs became a socialist, and he became a charter member of the Industrial Workers of the World. Now, a lot of people call it International Workers of the World, but that's wrong. It was the Industrial Workers of the World, meaning that they wanted industrial organizing. They wanted to organize everybody instead of just the elite. So I believe it was in 1905 or 1906, they had their convention, and they said that the bosses and the workers have nothing in common, and that they were going to organize everybody, and that they were going to overthrow the wage system. Even though we count them as unions, a lot of them didn't consider themselves unions. They considered themselves revolutionaries. They were out to overthrow the system. And their idea was to organize all workers, and once you got all workers organized, you could shut the country down anytime you wanted to. If you had all the workers organized, you could just say, okay, tomorrow we're changing systems, and if you don't like it, we're not coming to work. So they had a great idea. And I want to just pause one moment to talk about criticism. Because when people talk about the industrial workers of the world, they always have a section on what they did wrong. What did they do wrong? The same thing is true of the Soviet Union, which just collapsed. What did they do wrong? And so there are books about it, there are lectures. They didn't necessarily do anything wrong. They got beat.
Yeah.
The other side beat them. The United States and the worldwide imperialist system defeated the Soviet Union. They were beaten. The industrial workers of the world had to take on the entire United States government. Hundreds of them got deported, thrown into prison, killed, horsewhipped, and they got beat. So I'm not going to dwell on what they did wrong. But I will dwell on something I think that's very interesting about the industrial workers of the world, which is that we don't know much about them. They sell these little songbooks, and everybody loves their songbooks. They have a group right now up in Denton, and they make their money by selling these little songbooks. They were great at poetry and songbooks. And Joe Hill, you've heard of Joe Hill, I think? He wrote songs for the IWW. And yet we don't know really much about them. The reason has to do with this man. Big victory today. I got a notice the public library's got this book now. They didn't have it before. I requested it and they told me today, come and get your book. You know, we've ordered it for you. It cost $34, so I was very impressed that they got one. This is a new book, Frank Little and the IWW, by Jane Little Botkin. She's Frank Little's grand niece. I had a little bit to do with this book, I'm proud to say, because the Little family, like everyone else, was afraid to talk about Frank Little. All the children were told, don't talk about your Uncle Frank. The industrial workers of the world were so repressed that people were afraid to talk about them, much less join, much less give them any money, much less be any help. They scattered. The president ran off, went to Russia. I don't think he was president, but he was the principal officer. So we don't know a lot about them because of the repression that began more or less on August the 1st, 1917. A lot of people know what happened on August the 1st, 1917, because that's very well documented and written about a lot. That's the night that they took Frank Little out and hanged him.
Oh, yeah.
They knocked him off his crutches, put a rope around his neck, dragged him through the streets on the back of a car, Cadillac.
Who did?
I'll get to that. And then took him to a railroad trestle and hanged him. His kneecaps were gone. They'd been rubbed off on the streets of Butte. That wasn't the first time Frank Little was lynched, by the way. It was actually the third time. And it wasn't the first time he'd been kidnapped either. It was actually the third time. So his family didn't know anything about him any more than anybody else did. But my wife and I, this is our hobby, is finding out stuff about labor, and we're particularly interested in Oklahomans because I'm an Okie. So we were up in Tulsa trying to find out, is there a problem somebody needs a seat? Well, he could just pull up a chair. So we were up in Oklahoma trying to find out about the Green Corn Rebellion when the farmers of Oklahoma, the sharecroppers of Oklahoma, tried to overthrow the government. We don't know much about that either. And we thought Frank Little had something to do with it, so we looked up Frank Little while we were in the library in Tulsa, and we found out that he was from a little town right outside of Tulsa. I can't remember the name of it, but it's now part of Yale, Oklahoma. So we went over to Yale, Oklahoma, and went to the cemetery and found his mother and one of his sisters in the cemetery. And we started asking around town if there were any Littles left. And the postmaster told us how to find Phalia Little, Frank Little's niece, his actual niece. So we found her and sat down, had lunch with her, and we told her that in our opinion, Frank Little was one of the most important figures in American labor history. She was shocked. She said, well, we never talked about it. We were told not to talk about it. So she didn't know anything about it. But she started talking to her other relatives, and one of her nieces wrote this book. So,
And her name is, who wrote the book?
Jane Little Botkin, Botkin. If you got $34, I'll sell you one of these books. I bought 3 of them. So, Jane Little Botkin wrote this book. She not only had very, very thorough research about the industrial workers of the world, but she had all the family archives and the family photographs and stuff like that, and the actual remembrances of the few people that knew anything about Frank Little. So this turns out to be a wonderful book, and it fills in a gap in our understanding of labor history. From about 1905 until his death in 1917, Frank Little was a major figure in the industrial workers of the world. At the time he was killed, he was the president of the board, the General Executive Board. Frank Little organized immigrants 90 years before the AFL-CIO started doing it. He lied about his own heritage. He told everybody he was half Indian, which turns out, according to this book, he wasn't. But that helped him talking to the immigrants that he was trying to organize around the mine. So he told everybody he was half Indian. And he organized immigrants, and he organized farm workers 30, 40 years before Cesar Chavez did. He used civil disobedience, nonviolent resistance techniques 20 or 30 years before Gandhi did, and a long time before Martin Luther King did. I'm trying to tell you, Frank Little was important. Frank Little made a lot of difference. Frank Little thought that since the IWW was a revolutionary organization, they should resist World War I, and they should tell their members to avoid the draft and go to prison instead, the way the Mennonites did. The other major labor leader in the whole world who had that position was Lenin in Russia. And he used it to make a revolution in Russia. They didn't have a revolution in the United States. Frank Little lost the argument. The other members of the General Executive Board outvoted him, and so the industrial workers of the world accepted the draft and went in the army for World War I. If he had gotten his way, I'm not saying there would have been a revolution, but there would have been considerably more of a stir than there was. He said that this is a slaughter fest, and I'd rather face a firing squad than to support this war. He said that everything that we have fought for, including free speech, will be taken away from us in this war. And he was absolutely right. Free speech was one of the first casualties of World War I. People were, as I said a while ago, deported, horsewhipped, killed for not supporting World War I, not buying bonds and that sort of thing. So Frank Little was an extremely important guy. And yet we know almost nothing about his life. We do know about his death, and I'll go over that very briefly. There was a mine accident in June of 1917. There was a mine called the Spectator Mine, where the bosses were supposed to have installed some places for people to get out, some ways for people to get out, but they hadn't. They hadn't done the safety measures that they were supposed to have done. And when the mine collapsed, I believe it was 169 or thereabouts, miners were trapped. When they found their bodies, their fingernails and fingertips were gone where they had tried to claw their way out before they suffocated. The bosses did what bosses do. They said, well, that's really, really bad. We lament this. We may have a special prayer for these people or something, but the rest of you get back to work. The miners said no. They said, until we get mine safety, we're not going back to work. The bosses then pulled out, what is it called? The last refuge of a scoundrel? Is that what H.L. Mencken called it? Patriotism.
Patriotism.
Oh.
How does it go? You know the quote?
Yeah, patriotism is the last refuge of a scoundrel.
Patriotism is the last refuge of a scoundrel. Well, these scoundrels told the miners, okay, the mines are not safe, and okay, we're not going to fix it. But you've got to get back to work because you've got to be patriotic, and we need the copper for the war effort. So I guess everybody was just sort of thinking about that until Frank Little got to town. Frank Little got up there on his crutches in the ballpark and said, to hell with the miners and to hell with the war. To hell with the mine owners and to hell with the war. A few nights later, hoodlums, who were certainly employees of Anaconda Mining Company, even though it's never been proven, dragged him out of his rooming house and tied a rope around his neck and did all the things that I talked about a while ago. The repression that was begun, let's see, who was the head of the, it wasn't FBI, but what was the repressive forces and what was his name? They named the Red Scare after him. I forgot his name. No, this is Palmer. They started the Palmer raids, which began at Industrial Workers of the World headquarters in Chicago, where they took everything that there was that anybody knew anything about Frank Little, including his death mask. So we don't even know what happened to the death mask. The government took it. They took everything from the Industrial Workers of the World headquarters, and they Palmer raided everybody, everywhere. Mr. Palmer had a very able assistant at that time named J. Edgar Hoover, who carried out repression against the whole labor movement, against all workers, against anybody who stood up against the war. And in the Industrial Workers of the World, even though they hadn't stood up against the war, they just didn't like workers. And this went on at least till 1923. And I maintain, although I could be argued with on this, I maintain that the Palmer Red Scare was worse than the McCarthy period that some of us can remember. Because we saw, 140 communists go to prison, 2 of them get executed, and a lot of people, thousands and thousands of people lost their jobs. That was the McCarthy period. And I maintain that the Palmer Red Scare was even worse. At any rate, it just disappeared, that period of labor history. And that just reminded me of this great ending in this book. I had forgotten about it, but I want to find the ending and share it with you. Because this book is a turnaround. For the first time, we really know about Frank Little, what he really did. I never knew he killed a guy once. It's in this book. But the family knew it.
We can't hear it out here. Maybe we want to make it a little louder.
I could talk louder. I've been kind of holding back. Well, that's not Well, I guess I'm not gonna be able to find it. But she said that the entire history of the period, oh, here it is. Their children and grandchildren were simply told that Alonzo Little had a brother, a socialist who was hanged in Butte, Montana. Butte was a long way from Oklahoma, and the murder was decades in the past. Frank became the ghost in the family closet, easily put away with old scrapbooks, family Bibles, photos, and the truth. Jane Little Botkin, Frank Little in the IWW. It's really worthwhile. And that concludes my remarks. Thank you. Tom, go. You better take over, Tom. Oh, questions. I have to stay up here for questions. Okay. And if you know something that I did wrong, it's okay you can say it now. Questions or comments. And then there's going to be another section where people will actually come up here and deliver their versions. Okay. Go ahead.
I know there was a lot of overlap between sort of organizers in the Socialist Party and the IWW in the early 1900s. Also a lot of disconnect, some disagreement within the SP, the right wing of the SP, on the tactics of the IWW. I was wondering if Frank Little related at all to the SP of that period, or if he was just kind of pure wobbly.
Okay, the question was, when the Socialist Party and the IWW started going their separate ways, what did Frank Little do? He was all IWW. Mrs. Botkin, who wrote the book, really isn't very political herself. So she didn't emphasize the political divisions of the time. But Frank Little was all IWW. He still wanted to organize everybody. He wanted to oppose the war. And interestingly enough, the Socialist Party did oppose the war. That was their official position. Although they didn't really do much about it. And of course, like any political group, there was the right wing and the left wing and all that. And the IWW and the Socialists were not close. Debs himself more or less gave up the IWW when he was running for president as a socialist. The IWW had this idea they're going to organize everybody and take over the world that way. The socialists believed they were going to get elected. And so that split was pretty important. But in answer to your question, he was all IWW. Bonnie?
Didn't you mention a couple weeks ago that Miss Botkin is actually going to be here?
She's coming in October the 6th and 7th for a book festival. She's doing a book tour. The book festival will be downtown at that, I think it's in that park that's across the street from the Federal Building. It's going to be in a tent. But I have her for a short reception at 1408 North Washington in the bar, in the little entrance room at 6 p.m. on October the 8th. And she'll be bringing a stack full of books to sell, I'm sure. She's gotten to be quite a personality on her own, because this is a woman spent her whole life teaching school down in Dripping Springs, down by Austin. She never really knew who her uncle was until she started doing this research. And Then on August the 1st of 2017, this year, it was the 100th anniversary of the slaying of Frank Little. So she went to Butte, Montana to celebrate the 100th anniversary.
Wow.
And all of labor turned out, hundreds of people turned out. Frank's grave is up there, and on the tombstone it says, Frank Little, slain by capitalist interests for elevating and uplifting his fellow man. So the grave is still there, you can go. And when I was up there was one IWW guy that would go and clean that grave every day and put fresh flowers.
What time is the reception on the 8th?
On the 8th, it'll be 6 p.m. I only have the room from 6 to 7
Okay, that's cool.
because it'll be at the end of her long weekend for her.
Will you put on Facebook?
Sure.
Okay.
I'll make an event on Facebook.
Okay, good.
It's been a real eye-opening experience for her because, as I said, she's not political. She's never been active in anything. I don't even know if she was in the teachers union before. And all these union guys are saluting her and sending her love letters and everything. You know, we're all crazy about her. And all she really did was discover her uncle.
Wow.
Yes, sir.
Did you know that there are 2 books about Frank Little that you can get as e-books, like for $29.95? This first one is the Frank Little and the IWW, and the other one is
That's this one.
Always on Strike.
The other one is what?
Always on Strike.
Okay.
Frank Little and
There's-
Western Wobble.
And there's one other too. The one Frank Little Always on Strike came out about a year ago. I reviewed it, and I was very glad that somebody had written about Frank Little. But frankly, I don't think the author knew anything that he can get off of my website.
Probably where he did his-
And he was a college professor, and he added all this stuff about European philosophers. And it said Frank Little may have been thinking like Thomas Mann, some European philosopher. He may have been thinking like this guy, and then he'd write a whole chapter on what they thought. You know? And he didn't have any idea if Frank Little thought that or not. You know, he was just filling out his book. So I was glad that somebody wrote a book about Frank Little, but it really was not much. There's another whole book just about the death of Frank Little, because that is very, very widely known and well documented, even though nobody ever admitted doing it. You know who said he knew who did it? Do you know who Dashiell Hammett is?
Sure, yeah, of course.
Who wrote The Thin Man?
Yeah.
Dashiell Hammett was a Pinkerton detective in Butte, Montana in 1917. And as you know, he shacked up with Lillian Hellman, the great playwright. And she, in her memoirs, she says, Dashiell told me that he knew who did it, and that the company had offered him $5,000 to kill Frank Little.
Wow. I believe it.
There's no documentation. Dashiell Hammett didn't put that in his memoirs. It's just in Lillian Hellman's. So we don't really know. But I don't know of anybody that knows anything about this who believes anybody else killed Frank Little besides the Anaconda Copper Mining Company. Has anybody ever seen a movie called A River Runs Through It?
Yes.
Where Brad Pitt is this very handsome, charming guy. He gets his head beaten in, doesn't he, by the Anaconda Copper Mining Company. So I don't even know if that was fiction or supposed to be true or what, but they were not somebody you want to mess around with. And Frank Little, because he took on the war as well as the bosses, paid the price. It wasn't the bosses that defeated the IWW. It was the government. Today's the anniversary, by the way, of the miners' strike in, is it Stone Mountain? Do we have any miner experts in here? The first time that strikers were ever bombed from the air was September the 2nd, I believe 1923. They were bombed. Airplanes flew over them and dropped bombs on them.
Where was this? Where was West Virginia?
West Virginia. Stone, is that where Stone Mountain is?
No, it's.
They call it the Stone Mountain Strike.
That's in Georgia.
Is he answering?
In Georgia?
Georgia's Stone Mountain.
Well, they call it the Stone Mountain Strike. I was reading about it on the radio today. When things get slow on the radio, I read stuff from history. Go ahead.
Wasn't the owner of a mine that blew up named Blankenship, and he went to prison, and now he's going to run for Senate? Keep your
Did
eye
everybody
on
hear what
that.
she said?
Keep your eye on that
Please
one.
repeat it.
He wants to run for office. Keep your eye on that.
This was a mining
I don't know. His
incident
Yeah,
maybe 10 years ago.
yeah, Blankenship.
It's like up
And she says the guy's name was Blankenship.
Yeah,
You know
well,
about it?
I don't know his first name, but
It was like the
Blankenship.
Upper Big Branch Mine or something.
Yeah.
Upper Big Branch
Yeah.
Mine.
Yes.
And the company denied and denied and
Yeah.
denied and denied.
Right.
And
People died.
and they actually found out the company was at fault. And they actually put
It's a
the
non-union.
put the
mine.
denier, the head denier, they put him in prison.
It was non-union.
And she's saying now that he's running for the U.S. Senate.
Yeah.
Yeah, he was claiming to have been a political prisoner.
Oh my God.
Well,
Well,
Evil.
Yeah.
I have an announcement about that you won't believe. Donald Trump is the president of the United States. So if you'll believe that, you'll believe anything. Almost anything can happen. Yes, sir?
Hey, being that Frank Little, his activity was during a very, very turbulent period overseas for leftist politics and such. What were his, I guess, do you have any sort of contacts internationally as the IWW, and what were those like?
That is a great question, and I'm sorry, I do not know. It's not in this book. As far as I know, the industrial workers of the world were an American phenomenon. I don't know what they felt about activities around the world. There were syndicalists in France, and there are claims that the industrial workers of the world were influenced by these Frenchmen. William Z. Foster was in the industrial workers of the world at that time, and he went to France to study the syndicalists. Now, if I'm not mistaken, the syndicalists is one way of saying people who think that you can organize trade unions that will take over the world, if I'm not mistaken. So there were different currents and different ideologies, and we really don't know much about Frank Little except that he wanted to organize everybody and that he saw the industrial workers of the world as a revolutionary organization. And a lot of the members thought of it as a union. Thought of it just as, we're just going to try to get a better deal. We're going to try to get a better bunkhouse or something like that. Yes, sir?
What was the what was the date you were talking about, the Anaconda mine? What approximately was the date that was all taking place?
Well, the date that I mentioned was August 1st, 1917.
Yeah, do you know John Reed, the only American buried in the Kremlin, wrote a lot about the miners' strikes in 1914.
Yeah. There were a lot of miners' strikes. I think John Reed was better known for textile. Have you ever seen the movie Reds?
Oh, yeah.
John Reed's
Favorite movie of all
quite a
time.
figure in that.
Yeah, I have a book by,
I read that.
it was essays done by John Reed.
Mm. And according to the movie Reds, he supported the industrial workers of the world. The other person that's buried in the Kremlin wall is the Big Bill Haywood, who was the principal officer of the industrial workers of the world. And he is still revered in American labor, even though he ran out and left the IWW to pay his bond. And he went to Russia to get away keep from having to go to prison in the Palmer repression period. And he died in the Soviet Union and is also in the Kremlin wall along with John Reed.
My dad was the treasurer of the local steelworkers union in Cincinnati. He was a machinist, and he would sing the CIO song. I belong to the CIO because everyone I CIO.
I don't think that was the CIO song.
I like that. Here,
Yes, sir.
here, hold the mic.
If you were to take a broad sweeping guess, how much of our history that we're taught from childhood in history books that we believe in, etc., is factual and how much is slanted by the winners?
Henry Ford said history is bunk. And then someone else, I don't know who it was, said history is always written by the winners. You probably know. Who did say that?
I don't know.
Well, it's a common saying anyway.
It was said by a winner.
It was said by one of the winners. The labor movement
Probably Donald Trump.
wins small victories. But this is what's wrong with the labor movement. We never win any big victories. The labor movement, as we understand it, you have to remember that the labor movement is basically the unions, the organized labor. It's not the same thing as the working class. Most generally, the working class doesn't have a union. Most workers don't have a union. That's why you might find more in common between the civil rights movement and the working class than between the unions and the working class. They don't always agree. There are things that come up in which the unions take an opportunist stand, something that will benefit them and their own members, and not necessarily the working class. And this is every day. There's a fare increase coming for DART, is there not?
Yep.
Does anybody know the union's position on that?
They were against it.
The union, the Amalgamated Transit Union, is against it?
They were, yeah. Because
Good.
they knew that it would affect the people that ride the bus and take the train. I mean, that's
Well,
the customers.
the Amalgamated Transit Union has the trains as well as the buses.
Right, but they were against the fare increase because of the effect that it will have on the ridership.
I have a friend that likes to tell a story about, I think it was the electrical workers, that said that if they're going to build a nuclear power station in your front yard and it's going to get any jobs for my members, we're going to be for it. So we don't, in the union movement, we don't always have the same view as the working class in general. But I think Frank Little did. I think the industrial workers of the world did, because there were, a lot of them were revolutionaries. They weren't just looking at getting a little bit more money or getting a little bit better deal. They intended to overthrow the system. And they thought they could. And all of the pundits, when they talk about this, they always talk about what did they do wrong. And I maintain they did not do something wrong, they just got beat. The other side knew what they were going to do, and the other side was stronger, and so they got beat. I don't know if it would have worked or not. Frankly, I'd still like to try it. I sure like to see if it would work.
My question is, in 1955, the AFL-CIO merged.
Yes.
And many people thought that that it would become a Labour Party like the Labour Party in England. That didn't happen. And the other party is, in 1980, the point you made about the AFL was the elitist part of the labor movement. And they were concerned about what they would have to feel if their members, not a broad base.
Yeah.
And many of the labor unions voted for President Reagan in 1980.
Some of them.
And he abolished the air traffic controllers union.
Yes.
How do you connect those 2 points?
The air traffic controllers thought they were going to get a really good deal from Ronald Reagan. He told them, "Yep, you're going to get a really good deal from me." And so they supported him. You know, the president of that union used to live out here in, I think, Irving. I used to see him every now and then, and he would explain all about that. I'm reading about William Green right now. William Green was the head of the AFL for many, many years. And his idea was that we're all Christians, and the bosses are Christians, and we're Christians, and Christians love each other and help each other. So all we really need to do is remind the bosses of that. This was the head of the AFL. He got slaughtered. He got creamed. He got defeated over and over and over again. He went right on. Well, we're all Christians. Why can't we just all sit down together and, man to man, and work this out? And he brought the labor movement to ruin. That was pretty much the AFL.
Well,
and by the way, they really hated the IWW. The government was bad enough, but they had the AFL to deal with too.
Okay, my question is, in recent years, it seems that labor unions are...
Talking to Mike, please.
In recent years, labor unions seem to be losing members rather than gaining. The growth was in the public employees, but Scott Walker in Wisconsin and others, taking steps to limit that. And there are some people who try to organize workers in hospitals and things like that. What do you think labor unions are to do? Because they played a critical role. What should they do to come back and be a voice for people against management in the government?
Those are great questions. Everybody get it?
Yeah.
What should the labor unions do now to try to get back? To try to get back the strength that they lost? Now, I've gone over this before in other presentations to this group. In my opinion, the labor movement made a great mistake in 1947. They kicked out all the communists and socialists, and any union that refused to swear a loyalty oath was kicked out of the CIO. They kicked out 14 unions, and then they raided them. So that out of those 14, only 2 are still in existence. So I think that the labor unions made a drastic mistake. Up until, from the period from 1935 when the CIO was formed, up until 1947, they organized a lot of people. They organized a lot of black people. They organized a lot of women. They organized a lot of immigrants. They organized everything that moved. If they could, they would organize them. The CIO would. But they quit. In 1947, they gave it up. They had a program to organize the South. They gave it up. And they had a civil rights outreach to organize black workers in the South. And they gave it up. And there were so many of them at that time that they continued to look pretty good until, I'd say, 1957. And in 1957, they had 35% of the workforce in America organized. And presidents of the United States would take their hats off and sit down with them because they had a lot of votes. But they had lost their connection to the rest of the working class. And so they became more and more isolated. So when Mr. Reagan got elected and broke the deal, we're not pals of yours anymore. We're not good Christians that are going to sit down with you and work with you, you know. We're going to destroy you if we possibly can. That began in 1980. And by 1995, we were down to 14%. And I think we're down 11% today.
Yeah.
The big years of losses have stopped. We're still losing ground, but we're dealing with a hostile government. You just look at the last legislature in the Texas legislature. They had bill after bill to do away with unions. And some of them would even say so. They would say, okay, my legislation doesn't make any sense in any other way, but it's going to hurt unions. So they tried to pass dreadful anti-union legislation. It did pass some of it. And you mentioned Scott Walker, who actually did take away a lot of the rights of the public workers in his state. And the Texas legislature is trying to do that here. So they're trying to deal with the government, and the government teamed up with the bosses. It's very, very hard to overcome. Now, what should they do, though? That's what you've asked. What they should do is what the Dallas AFL-CIO is in the process of doing. Reaching out to the civil rights movement, reaching out to the gay pride parade, reaching out to women, standing up for abortion rights, standing up for the progressive movement, being part of the progressive movement, and to some extent even leading the progressive movement. Now, this doesn't just happen overnight because it's the labor movement. You know, they have to deal with their members and what they're going to do about their particular contract that they have, and some of the ways that they've gotten screwed. My own union had about 5,000 people in the bargaining unit when I went to work there. Now has about 250. That's what's left of LTV. Yes, sir.
In 1947, was there a Taft-Hartley Act that
Yes.
really damaged labor?
Yes.
How did that damage labor? I've got that lodged in my mind.
Well, it damaged labor in a lot of ways, but particularly the one that we felt the worst here in Texas was it legalized the right to work laws. There was considerable people trying to get what they call open shop. In other words, trying to keep unions from being able to represent everybody in a shop, which was the industrial idea, you know, so we're going to organize them all. And the bosses always wanted us divided. So they passed this law which legalized the open shop. Well, it outlawed the closed shop. And then somebody at the Dallas Morning News came up with the great idea of calling it right to work. And so today people are totally confused. And that happened here in Dallas. I want to emphasize that we're not talking about things that are going on in Timbuktu or something. What's happening is happening in Dallas, both the good and the bad.
Gene, can you comment on Hurricane Harvey and all the draconian things that was done to people, like not letting them know where what kind of chemicals are in these chemical plants, the insurance and so forth, all the things that have hurt people?
Well, it's kind of far afield from what I've been talking about. Perhaps you'd like to bring up more of the, you probably know more about it than I do, in other words.
Wow.
We do know that after the destruction of the fertilizer plant in West, that people wanted to know where those dangerous chemical plants were. And the Texas legislature refused to pass that legislation. So today, when those plants are blowing up in the drowning, and people don't know what's in them, and some of it's toxic, and all that water that's down there is toxic. People that go wading in that water are getting gangrene and other infections because the water is so filthy. But that's more on the political side. I do want to say that the AFL-CIO is having a very, very strong response to disaster relief. And the vice president of the AFL-CIO was in Austin on Thursday. Bonnie and I listened to the call. She pledged $500 million over the next 5 years.
Right, from the.
That was for housing.
Yeah, and
There was $5 million that they were going to raise. I think a lot of that's for training.
Yeah, well, the $5 million, they're gonna contribute $5 million in cash.
Okay.
Up front. She brought a check for $100,000.
Right.
And they have committed $500 million for for residential and multifamily dwellings, either to rebuild and special projects, that type of thing. $150 million has been committed so far to the commercial development in the area.
And on Monday,
AFL-CIO.
and on Monday at the AFL-CIO breakfast, they're going to turn that into an opportunity to raise money for the flood victims. They're going to pass out pledge cards and try to get people to fill out pledge cards and raise as much money as they possibly can. And all the unions are doing something like that. And many of the unions have their own effort to cover their own members. So that's just the labor movement. I wish they would all do it together, but they're doing it all over the place.
Gene, can you talk to the effect of NAFTA GATT on the unions?
Of NAFTA?
NAFTA and GATT on the unions.
NAFTA and gas?
GATT.
Yeah, go GATT. Okay. When NAFTA was being negotiated, we didn't do much of anything about it here in Dallas. Jobs with Justice, some of us were in a group called Job with Justice, and we organized against NAFTA. Well, most people didn't talk about it. They waited until it really started to hurt them before they really did anything about it. That was back in the days when really the labor movement just really kind of wasn't up on things, didn't see things coming as bad as well as they do now. Today they are talking about renegotiating NAFTA, and the AFL-CIO has all these principles that they're saying this is what it needs to have and this is what it should not have and that sort of thing. And it makes a lot of difference to us people in the Alliance for Retired Americans because of drugs. The people who want to renegotiate NAFTA want to be able to have the highest possible prices for drugs in America. And we want policies that would lower the price of drugs and get some of the deals that they make in Canada, for example. So we have strong positions about it, but these so-called trade deals are generally negotiated in secret, and I don't expect this one to be any different. They negotiate them in secret with just the corporations and the lobbyists and the government representatives, and they wouldn't let a worker in there for anything. And I don't expect it to be any different under Mr. Trump.
Yeah, what relationship do the trade unions have with the Democrat? The official, is there an official line or what? Or is it just okay?
Almost every time a major labor leader speaks, they say, I am not a Democrat, I am not a Republican, I am a trade unionist. And we always argue that we are not in the pocket of the Democrats. We don't belong to the Democratic Party and they don't tell us what to do. We always say that. But the polarity that has come about in America since Reagan. You remember, you're old enough to remember when we used to say it didn't really matter which party they were in. You know, you always voted for the man or woman. You know, you didn't. Heck, there weren't any women. It was the man. You know, and we would say that you couldn't tell the difference between Tweedledee and Tweedledee-dum. When that phrase became popular, they were talking about the Democrats and Republicans. So there were major trade union people who were Republicans. There were major trade union people who opposed Franklin Roosevelt, including the head of the mine workers, who
really the most influential person of all. He was against Franklin Roosevelt. So that's our official position. But in the polarity that you have today, it would be very, very strange to see the unions endorse a Republican. I know that there is a program to try to help some of the Republicans, because see, there are Republicans and then there's worse ones. And you take the Speaker of the House in Texas. I think most union people would a lot rather keep him than get that guy from Pampa, you know, or Miss Huffines, or you know, Mr. Huffines from Garland, or somebody like that. So, in the polarity that we have today, I really can't imagine unions endorsing a Republican. But officially, they're not in the pocket of the Republican Party.
Look at where the donations go.
Yeah, it nearly all goes to the Democrats.
Yeah.
Gene?
Well, let me just add one more thing about that. Here in Dallas, I'm not so sure that they influence us as much as we influence them.
Yep.
For example, we got in the Dallas City Council, we got rest breaks for construction workers. I didn't think that was even remotely possible. Well, we did get it, and we're seeing the Confederate monuments right now. They may take them down tonight, for all I know. I don't think that they have as much influence over us as we have over them.
Absolutely.
What, Bonnie?
Gene, talk about it a little bit, and tell me, what do you think about SEIU and Unite Here that are actually going out and organizing those hotels and the janitors and really kind of building from the ground up?
Yeah.
Can I comment on that?
Go ahead.
I mean, it's interesting that you bring up SEIU.
Stand up, they can hear you.
I mean, I think, you know, I totally agree that they should be organizing janitors and building things from the ground up and all this, but that's not necessarily what's going on with the SEIU right now. They announced that, well, internationally, the SEIU announced, I think just weeks after Trump was elected, they're reducing their organizing budget by 30%. This is the announcement of the International, one of the largest unions in the U.S. More recently, they announced that they're increasing their contribution to political campaigns. So they're taking away from organizing at the grassroots to give more and more money to, you know, inevitably Democrats, which I think is exactly the wrong strategy for the labor movement. I think we do need to be organizing and building at the grassroots, and, you know, we'll see results from that.
That's certainly what Frank Little would say, isn't it? I don't know. You can't, you know, individual unions make their decisions based on how they can best represent their members. They are not looking at the working class. They are not looking at how to overthrow the government. You are, but they're not. That's not the nature of the beast. Yes, sir.
My question is actually going back to the political question with regards to the support of Democrats. I know that the AFL-CIO typically doesn't endorse anybody on within primaries at a national level. Do you foresee that ever changing for them, being that, especially the changes with regards to within the Democratic Party since the Clinton administration?
They endorsed Obama in the primaries.
And Hillary.
They endorsed Hillary this time.
My union did. Shoot.
Your union did, but not the AFL-CIO didn't.
You know,
my union did as well, which is part of the AFL-CIO, but the AFL-CIO, as I understand it, as a whole, did not endorse anybody during the primary.
Yeah. Do I see them as endorsing in the primaries? Actually, here's what I think is going to happen. This is pure speculation. And remember that I have no authority in the labor movement. I'm more of a gadfly. In fact, I don't even know anything about labor history. I'm more of an artifact than I am a historian. So here's what I think is going to happen. I think that the progressive movement is going to converge. I think it is a great blessing that the AFL-CIO is more of a part of that than they ever were before. And they're not giving up being unions. You have to understand that they are what they are. But they are doing more outreach, becoming more part of the civil rights movement. Is my eyesight failing me, or is the head of the A. Philip Randolph Institute back there? Raise your hand. That woman is a member of Amalgamated Transit Union, and she is also the head of the civil rights movement for the Dallas AFL-CIO. So she could talk about the way things are moving. Some of the things that we're doing now are unprecedented. We have a group of young people now, and I think you're one of them, that is called, what do they call it? Y'all? Young Active Labor Leaders. They don't have in Dallas, as far as I know, a pride unit yet. But in some cities they do. And that's an outreach to the gay community, a union part of the gay community.
Pride at work.
Pride at work, yeah. And there was a really good movie about that, but it was in England. Anyway, there is more outreach going on than ever before. And the unions are listening to the other activists more than ever before. That's why I stick with the unions. And I didn't always. I used to call them the AFL-CIA. Because they were joined at the hip to the CIA. If any country had a progressive movement that involved unions, the AFL would go there with CIA money and try to overthrow that progressive movement. I saw them myself in Nicaragua. When the Nicaraguans tried to organize a national trade union movement that was part of their revolution, here comes the CIA with suitcases full of money under the front of the AFL-CIA. So I didn't used to always like them. I bought into it in 1995. In 1995, I was working Jobs with Justice, which was sort of an outlaw part of the labor movement. We helped the labor movement. We didn't take orders from them, though. Hobie was in that with us. And we did some very good things, like, for example, standing up against NAFTA when they weren't doing it. But then in 1995, I said, I don't think we need Job with Justice anymore. And Job with Justice today is part of the AFL in Dallas. The Job with Justice office is right down across the lobby from the Alliance for Retired Americans office. So there's a convergence of the progressive movement. I don't think that the unions are going to lead that. I think the progressive movement's going to come up with its own leadership in the struggles that we are in. How many of you were down there at the rally against white supremacy not so long ago? Did you notice how many different currents there were there? There were guys there that hated Jesus. And there were t-shirts saying, "I hate Jesus." And there were people there that were on the abortion issue. There were people there on all kinds of different things, but they were all against white supremacy. And the AFL-CIO was there. So I think there's a convergence. And I'm frustrated with it because it's not going as fast as I would like it to. But I do think that's how change is going to come about. I think we're going to drop our sectarian ways and put our opportunism aside and start becoming a progressive movement that can change the system. And until then, we will never win. We'll only win temporary battles, will never win a decisive battle until we overthrow this system and implement something more humane, more democratic than what we have ever seen.
That's the revolution.
That's just me, and as I said, I'm just an artifact.
Well, if you're not a, if you're not a labor historian, I don't know who is. You know, I thank you for this. This is the best thing that, I mean, this has been a bad week. And for a lot of people. Not so bad for me as it has been for a lot of people, but yeah, you know, it's just been nasty with all the news and everything about Houston. But can you speak to the issue? I mean, the status of Walmart. Supposedly, like Walmart was going to improve their. Well, no, yeah, you can speak to your current position on Walmart, but have they really improved anything for the workers at Walmart?
Yeah. Yeah, they got a raise a couple of years ago.
Was it substantial? I mean,
it's better than not getting a raise.
Yeah. Okay.
It's better than not getting a raise.
Okay.
The bosses tend to give in, you know, sometimes a certain amount. That's why the Confederate monuments are going to come down in Dallas. I see Christy back there. Christy was new to Dallas. I think she's from New Mexico. Raise your hand, Christy. And I had the unfortunate task of explaining to her what Lee Park was. And she said, "Oh my God, what kind of a place have I come to?" She didn't know that we had devoted an entire park to the leading general of the Confederate Army.
And I did not think it would come down. I did not think that. I had even texted my dear friend back there, Susan, and said that the hell will freeze over if that comes down in Dallas. I did not. If it does, I'll be thrilled.
Sherilyn, is it going to come down? It's going to come down. It is going to come down. So Dallas knows when to give in and when to go ahead, and when to take and when to give in. And they're going to give in on this. They're just trying to figure out some way to minimize the damage for them, you know.
You got a lot of the Alamo names.
I want to take down the one in Gainesville. I am so ashamed of Gainesville, which massacred the supporters of the suspected supporters of the Union. They massacred them. They hanged over 50 of them in one weekend. And then they put up a damn 40-foot monument to the Confederacy that's in Gainesville right now. And they always say they're going to put up a monument to those people that they murdered, but they haven't. So I'd like to see it come down in Gainesville. It's progress. Somebody was on the radio the other day and they said, "What are they going to do next? Take down the Alamo?" And I thought, oh, take down the Alamo. Why should we have a tribute to slave traders? Well, anyway, you make a little, you win a little, but these are always temporary. Working people have never had a decisive victory in America. We've only won little things. We got more people organized than we used to have sometimes. Maybe we got a raise. We drove up wages and the standard of living to the point that before Reagan got in, we had the highest standard of living in the world. We don't anymore, not anywhere nearly. But before that, we did have the highest standard of living in the world. And so we made some gains, but they were never decisive. So I think there will be a decisive victory, and I think it'll come about the way Frank Little thought it would. I think it will come about by everybody being organized, not necessarily as workers, not necessarily in their workplaces, not necessarily the way the IWW had it figured out. They had 12 unions. They were going to have 12 leaders, and the wood workers are going to be one of them, and the textile workers will be one. and then they would have everybody, you know, kind of really organized. I don't think it's going to be like that, but I think the progressive movement is coming together. The progressive movement is winning some little stuff. Christie's not going to have to admit to her friends that she lives in a city where, or close to a city where they honor the Confederacy as much. So I think that's happening. I just met Bruce tonight, and I'm adding him to my list of important people to make the progressive movement stronger. Because Bruce comes from a faith background. We didn't used to have that. I can remember in the 80s, they were going to have a convention here for the AFL-CIO, and they called me to say, we need someone to say the prayer. I've been an atheist since I was 13 years old. But I was the only one that knew a preacher, because they didn't have any connection to the faith community. And now they do. You go to the breakfast on Monday, there'll be a number of people from the faith, progressive leaders from different churches and synagogues and mosques will be there, because now we have those connections, and that's the right direction. It's going to be hard, though. I mean, there's an awful lot of egos. There's an awful lot of sectarianism. There's an awful lot of opportunism to overcome in our own ranks. Thank goodness we have Donald Trump to make everything clear for us.
Crystal clear.
He is.
He doesn't triangulate me.
So I'm taking too much time. Is it time for the next phase?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay, now I'll finish my lunch and you get up here.
Okay, now it's your turn to talk. So who wants to be first? Each got 5 minutes, whatever you want. Come on up here and respond to what the speaker had to say, for or against. Come on up here, John.
Well, actually, this is just a few words to say about the article in the Guardian newspaper today. John Beasley, well known in these parts for rabble-rousing and other such things, and I'm going to give a talk in a couple of weeks. My refutation of a lot of right-wing notions. Anyway, what I was going to say was, in the Guardian newspaper, they always have a long article, and the long article today was the fact that the young people actually now don't believe that socialism is a dirty word anymore. And because of Bernie Sanders, but more importantly, the remarkable achievements of Jeremy Corbyn in England in the recent election, where his slogan was "for the many and not the few," and he outlined a whole program of really regenerating all the social services in England, which had been run down to threadbare, if not collapsing. That resonated with the young people, and apparently the young people over here are reading all of this and saying, yes, there is an agenda, and it can happen. And so apparently there's sort of a socialist organization now sort of sprung up in many states in America. So that was so. If you can catch that article, it's worth reading. For me, it's I would be amazed to see anything like that happen, but it's possible. I mean, if, as Gene said, if Trump could be elected, then anything can happen in America, you know. And but this country badly needs something, because it just can't go on as it's going. I mean, it just is. You know, it's headed towards disaster. I mean, you know, and that's what actually Trump bought into. The fact that he actually spoke to the working people and said, I understand your pain, as it were, and I'm going to bring all your jobs back. Well, it's total nonsense, but they believed it. because both parties had no plan for these people. I mean, certainly not the Democrats, who I think so totally lost. Their Democrats are in touch with Wall Street, but almost nobody else. And so they deserved to lose, and they did. So what with Bernie and the rule book from Jeremy Corbyn, if that really gets understood, then there is some hope.
I really debated about getting up here, but then John Beasley got up. I think that I would be talking about processes of mind, processes of logic. There is a rock-hard, solid foundation for unions. And I think that it's a very good thing if the union movement can keep a separation from socialism per se. And that is for a number of reasons, because you've got a lot of baggage on that side of things. The other thing I really want to say in a heartfelt way is that you need to bring your guitar next time.
You didn't say your name, sir.
No, we don't.
He's trying to keep
It's
it
up to you.
secret. Who's next? Bobby.
I want to thank the speaker for his presentation. It's a good historical evolution of the labor movement, and I think some of his suggestions of what you do to move forward are sound.
Would you identify yourself?
I'm Calvin Blewett.
Yeah.
I've been around here for a good while. And in the labor movement in the 50s, I thought they were very much involved in civil rights, because in 1964, in Texas, we only had 3 members in Congress, 1 senator and 2 congressmen, to vote for the Civil Rights Act. And I don't know whether many of you know about Beaumont, Texas. It suffered a great deal last week also in the water. But Beaumont was a very, very overtly racist community. And Congressman Brooks voted in Beaumont because he had labor support. The chemical factories and all refineries were unionized, and they voted, and he didn't have any fear. He voted. The other one was Congressman Gonzalez out of San Antonio, and the senator was Senator Ralph Yarborough. All the others voted against him. And during my father's working years, there were, in East Texas, where I grew up in Chesapeake, it's the heart of the Pinewood region, and sawmills, paper mills, that was the only thing people had to do other than farm work. And they were actually trying to organize men working for sawmill companies like Kirby Lumber Company. It was a huge lumber company in that area, and trying to organize those people, and also African Americans. So that was my experience with unions, and I thought they were, but until 1980, when the air traffic controllers voted for President Reagan, I wondered, and you brought to my attention that the AFL was elitist. And actually the core of the middle class came from organized manufacturing work in the United States. That was the core. They made much more money than most people did. My experience, my baby brother worked in steel until they closed the factory. And my oldest brother worked for what was now was Magnolia became Mobilize, Mobilize, so they've gotten back together. I had a master's degree, and my brother was a roofer, and he earned more in 6 months than I did in 12. And my oldest brother did much worse, much better than me, because the oil refinery paid real well, and steel did too. And some people argue it's because the steel workers were too aggressive in getting salaries high, and so that they priced themselves inside the market. I don't know, you can say what you think about that, I don't know. I do know that if there had not been for unions, most people would have worked for a great deal less. And I think they played a major role there. And there was a lot of union people were being prosecuted. I think the unions people, particular ones, they were kind of connected with, I guess some of them in the mafia, because President Kennedy, if he hadn't won the primary in West Virginia, he may not have been president. And because of Frank Sinatra's contact with the mafia, he won the primary. And then as soon as Robert Kennedy became Attorney General, he got after him. So that was some of the experience we have. So I hope the union can move in the direction you're talking about. Because, when we have to argue about a minimum wage, that's kind of bad. We haven't had one increase in about 10 or 12 years. And we need unions, and we need to have a more collaboration with them. And you may be the catalyst to deal with some of the problems that many of us discuss here, that nothing's going to change until we get beyond our little egoism and decide what's best for all of us, and get out and elect people who adhere to that, not be deceived, because we need to look at what people have done before we listen to what they say they're going to do. So that's my take on it, and I have a lot of respect for unions. I know that Debs and others were put in prison, and we were led to believe they were big crooks, so they were. And you were doing a difficult period with communism. Anything seemed like socialism, you had to go beyond the label of communism. And when I was in college in the 50s, if you hated a person, at that time, not only in Prairie View, but all over the country, if you wanted to make a person feel real bad, call them a communist. And if we want to make a person feel real bad in Prairie View, when I was there, they called him gay. That's what it is. We use labels and demonize people and divide us, and the people who are crooks get what they want, and we pay for it. Thank you.
Can't believe this. Is there no one else? Am I the last? Come on up here.
Yeah, more.
Hi, Shirley.
Good afternoon, everybody. I have been really enjoying sitting back there listening to my favorite man in the world, Gene. He has a lot of information that we really need. But as he stated, I am the president of the A. Philip Randolph Dallas chapter.
Can't hear you.
You have to get pretty close to those.
I am the president of the A. Philip Randolph Dallas chapter, and also I am a member of the ATU, Amalgamated Transit Union. And what we have done, me and my union president has come together as two presidents and decided that we're going to work together to make a change in the community. Unions, church, and community has one thing in common. We are the working class. And if we can get those three together, we can make a difference in every area that everybody wants to make a difference. So what I told my union president, everything that I go out to do under A. Philip Randolph, I would include ATU. And so a lot of my my union members are joining up, going with me to do things. On September the 25th, the doors were open at 6:30. We will actually start at 7. We're going to organize the southern sector. The issue is about DOIT. They're going to raise their rates on the back of the working class. And it's not fair at all. I've been driving for DOIT for over 25 years. I do not like the way they do business. And I tell you, they do not like me at all. Since I've been there, I have gotten 2 AVPs terminated. I have got managers demoted. I have got supervisors demoted. And the reason AVP I just got terminated was just this past June. And I'm working on another AVP. What they do to the new operators that come in, they say, you want to move up? Then you need to play this game with me. Well, got them busted. But for some reason, the AVP over transportation want to keep these crumb bugs there. So he just moved them to another department. But as sure as I'm standing before you, they will be gone. Because we all deserve to come to a workplace where we are all treated equally and fair. I tell them all the time, you do not have to like me. I did not come here to be your friend. I came here just like you did to make a living for my family. And I'm going to be treated with the same respect that you expect for me to treat you. DOIT does not have no care about the riders, period. It's all about the people up ahead want to keep money in their pockets. We got a bunch of pencil pushers down there, don't know nothing about the field work. And my thing, if you don't know nothing about the field work, you shouldn't be up here at top because you're causing problems. We have so many ailments that are documented. Diabetes, heart problems, back problems. We have all these ailments that are documented, but they have a workman's comp program, the 504 program, that they use their own doctors that they choose. Right. And they say everything that happened to us on the bus, an accident, car, truck. Y'all seen the truck hit the bus head on some months back. They told that operator, oh, that was something because you done got older. Wow. And she never got the treatment that she needed. Right. But my whole thing is we all got to pull together. We may not have the same thing on our agenda to get done. But if you call me and you got something going on, I'm going to show and support. And that's what we need to do. And we need to respect each other about whatever the issue is that we got. Because all issues are just as important as the other issues. And I thank you all for taking the time to listen to my big mouth.
Let me ask, isn't that guy back there from the Transit Riders Union? Isn't that the guy that I met once before? Are you going to say anything? Because when I heard that there was a transit riders group organized, I was wondering if the union and them would be able to work together. And I see them sitting across from each other at the table down there.
It's already done at the last DOIT board meeting. They wanted to meet with him today.
Well, come on up and tell us about the riders. That's exciting. That's exciting. Very exciting.
Hello. I didn't expect to be here.
You're here.
I work at a Walmart warehouse, and they just sent everybody home early for the night. So I drove from on the highway down here. Yeah. So the North Texas Transit Riders, we've been organizing since May, maybe, in advance of the the first public hearing about the fare increase. For those of you who maybe aren't aware, the fare increase involves a 20% increase across the board, but a 140% increase for reduced regional passes. So that's kind of confusing. They're getting rid of the reduced rate for regional passes. So students, children, disabled folks, seniors who use DART to get to Denton or to Fort Worth, their fares will go from $40 to $96 a month. Wow. Other fares will go up too, like they want to do away with the reduced rate for trade school students. So trade school students will go from paying $2.50 to $6, whereas traditional college students will pay continue to pay $2.50. So we think this is definitely classed. And if you're interested, what we've been doing is we've been going out on the trains, canvassing, talking to people about the fare increase. We've gotten over 800 signatures on our petition, but we're really looking for people right now to come out to the dartboard meetings, sign up to speak out against the fare hike. We have great t-shirts you can wear if you're interested that say fair fares on the top. And
do you have any petitions with you?
I don't. But there's a Facebook page. Yes, we have a website now, but on Facebook it's North Texas Transit Riders, Facebook/NTX Transit Riders. Thank you so much. My name's Taylor.
You coming up here? Is she coming up?
I think so.
I think so too.
Hi everyone, I hope you're well.
Hey, Christy.
Good to see everyone. I was just liking North Texas Transit on Facebook. Super excited about that effort. It affects a lot of working class, middle class, young people in this city, so we need to get on top of that. There are a couple of things I want to say. One is a funny story that happened to me today. I had to drive to 5 gas stations to put gas in my car. Anybody else have that experience lately? If you need gas, the gas station right next to this restaurant has gas. So that's where I filled up. But while we were waiting for gas, there was not a long line, but a line. And so I started talking to the gentleman at the gas pump directly next to me. And I said, how many gas stations did you have to drive to? And he said, I had to drive to 6. And I said, I had to drive around 2. But what was interesting was, one, I thought about how much we don't talk to each other anymore. Like, I probably would have never done that in an everyday American situation. But even more important than that, he said something like, at least Trump is trying to get us out of the Middle East. And I said, really? I said, that's good news if he's trying to do that. But as the conversation went on, I began to explain to him that our oil companies and our gas companies receive huge subsidies, right? Corporate welfare is what we like to call it, from the American taxpayers. And a lot of countries, specifically in the Middle East, the oil is owned by the people that live in the nation, meaning that it's a commodity of the people, for the people, by the people. And so profits that are made off the oil that is sold primarily to us in China is distributed to all the citizens. And he said, well, I'm a military brat and I used to live in London, and I know things could be a lot better, a lot more equal for all of us. So I just wanted to say tonight, take that little moment to connect with someone that you wouldn't normally connect with and spread the message that we can do better. It's not that we're doing terrible, and a lot of us talk about all the things we need to fix, but we can do better. and we have to insist that we do better. The other thing that I wanted to say is that many of you know that I'm organizing with Our Revolution North Texas, and we just had our statewide delegate meeting last weekend with Jim Hightower. How many know Jim Hightower? Yeah. So he's pretty awesome. We love Jim Hightower. And we will be having our general membership meeting this fall on the 24th. So I invite all of you, if you're out here fighting for the progressive message or you just think that we can do better, our main objectives are listed on the website. You can go to ourrevolution.com, but know that locally we plan to fight for Medicare for all. Universal health care is a big issue for us. The fight for 15, as Jean and so many other people talked about. Locally, transit is a big issue for us, the transit fare hikes, and K through 16 education. So we want to take the money away from the corporations, and we want to give the money to the people. So yeah, just hopefully you can join us. That's Sunday, 2 p.m., the 24th. Thanks, guys.
I'm Bruce Tennyson, long ago retired. Okay. Wow. Feel like I'm at a convention. We talked a little bit. I've done a lot of organizing with congregations and agencies. I organized a couple of agencies, Philadelphia and Tulsa and Dallas and so on. And I haven't seen much effort, much concern on the part of congregations to get involved, let alone not even necessarily the labor movement, just with working class people. If any of you, this is the way you begin organizing, I think. If any of you know people who might be interested from the standpoint of congregations, let alone denominations, congregations in getting involved in some way, or getting your people involved, I'd love to have you contact me. I'm Bruce Tennyson, 214-533-9131. Just give me a contact. I'll be in touch with them, and would love to be able to do that. Thanks.
The last one standing. Anyone else can come up here? I guess I am the last one standing. Anyway, I want to thank our speaker. I think he did a terrific job here tonight. That's all. Excuse me. My background is labor. I'm from Chicago, and I was a chairman for a labor union for 20 years there. And I ran for Congress 4 times. But anyway, that's all past history. The one thing that struck me, he brought up, he mentioned 1886. That was when Eugene Debs was involved, when the railroad strike, that happened in, the nationwide railroad strike. It was organized in Chicago, and that's where I'm from, by the way. And Eugene Debs, when he was in jail years later, he was in favor of an 8-hour day. I don't know if you remember that. He wanted a shorter work day. And in 1916, I believe it was, they passed the Adamson Law, which was established 8-hour day in the railroad industry. It was the first industry to have it in the country. And from that, in 1938, under FDR, they passed the Fair Labor Standards Act, reducing the work week from 60 to 40 hours, the work day from 10 hours to 8 hours. And they did not cut the pay. They got the same take-home pay in 8 hours they used to make in 10 hours. And it was a good thing for society. It was a federal law, not a state law. And it affected big corporations. It did not affect small business. And big corporations screamed like stuck pigs, but they had options. They could break up, become smaller corporations, get around the restrictive labor law, or they could spend money, become more productive, and produce more in less time in competition. Small business did in more time. Well, within 5 years, they spent the money. That's why they did it. They didn't want to break themselves up. And within 5 years, big business and labor went hand in hand. Each state legislature put the states on a shorter workday because business-owned companies want to eliminate their competition. That's how we got the 8-hour day and a 5-day work week, and that's how it spread throughout the world. It's something to remember. Today, due to automation, we have a lot of problems in our country. We're $19 trillion in debt due to corporations leaving town, going overseas. Also due to automation, and it's something we can't get our handle on, and the labor movement can. There's a real Eugene Debs talking about a shorter workday. He beat himself to death doing it, but the future of our country, we got 25 million people in this country that are either unemployed or underemployed today, and automation takes its toll. The real solution to our problem, and labor can move on this, is shorter workday. We need a 6-hour day instead of an 8-hour day. And we don't have to cut the pay. To get the same take-home pay in 6 hours, you're not making 8. You could reemploy 25 million people. And they'd have more people working paying taxes, less people not working draining taxes. Twofold benefit of increased tax revenue without raising taxes, and the government would be better off. We'd all be better off. But what I'm leading up to is, how do you get this done? And if you try to get it done, will the corporations leave town and go overseas even worse than they are now? And we have to address that. If we put tariffs on other countries, they're going to put tariffs on us. It's not going to work. But we can put tariffs on other corporations. Like Apple moved to China, and they're not here anymore. So what would the tariff be? The difference in labor costs, the difference in environmental protection, the difference in transportation costs, the difference in taxes. That's what they'd have to pay to ship something here and sell it. If they want to avoid those costs, they can produce it here. At least we'd produce what we're sold here. We'd have some jobs. Then we could shorten the workday and it wouldn't leave town on us. But our corporations, we get the best Congress money can buy. That's another problem. And the Congress won't vote for these things. The corporations own the Congress. That's the spot we're in. It's almost called fascism. So how do you deal with that? What will Congress vote for that will change things? In my view, they'll vote for free airtime, the last 90 days of a general election. They'll vote for that because to keep the money they raise, plus they have free airtime. And there's no history of a challenger being an incumbent since before the year 2000. That being the case, we can put that into play. We can get Congress to do that. We'd end up with a Congress that represents the people instead of representing the people buying their vote in Washington. Then you can put tariffs on corporations, then you can shorten the workday, and then you can have a better life. That to me is what we have to do as a labor, as people in this country in order to get things done. I hope I'm making some sense, but anyway, I give this back to our speaker. He gets to comment and close this meeting.
What do I get now, 5 minutes?
Whatever you know.
I get all the time I want?
Yeah.
Okay. Everybody get comfortable.
No, you don't. Run out of tape here.
Oh, we're out of tape? Okay. Most exciting things going on back there at that back table. I don't know if anybody's noticed, Taylor and Sherlyn are back there plotting. Do you realize, I told you at the beginning that we're making history now in Dallas. In this restaurant. Taylor and Sherlyn are back there working out an alliance between the riders and the employees at DART. Do you realize they could shut the city down? You realize they could do that? I mentioned that Frank Little and the IWW didn't fail because of something that they did. I'm not saying they did everything right, but they were beaten. They were beaten by the other side. What's going on in Venezuela today? What's going on in France today? You know they're trying to negotiate away the whole union contract, the whole union, the labor law in France. They're going to try to take it away from them. The other side. That's my biggest problem with the progressive movement. We spend all our time criticizing each other. And we don't pay much attention to the other side. The other side is very well organized. There's not that many of them. It's not that hard to organize 300 or 400 millionaires. The Koch brothers do it every year. They have a convention for their millionaires, people that are going to take over this or that, take over the legislature of, what state is it?
Kansas.
Well, they live in Kansas, but no, North Carolina.
Oh, North Carolina.
The legislature, they took over the legislature of North Carolina. There's a very good book called Dark Money that explains how they operate, but the point is there's just not that many of them. It's not that hard for them to get organized. They can throw a banquet and get pretty much every sociopath at the billionaire level to come, and they do every year. So it's not, they don't have too big a problem organizing. We do. There's a lot of differences that we have to overcome, a lot of problems that we have to overcome. But it is happening. It's happening all over the country. It's happening in Dallas, and it's happening in this restaurant. It's happening because you're talking to each other and you're listening to each other. And we are moving forward, and I have all the hope in the world. I just want to live long enough to see it.
Yep, that's right.
Thank you, Jesus.
Well, that's it for tonight. Our speakers, they kick us out of here about 10 o'clock, so we're good till then if you want to talk to our speaker. But our formal meeting is over. See you next week.
I need so much out of this. We can do so much. I mean, I can begin to do a little bit of stuff in the religious community. It's better than nothing. But no.
You were talking about activating the congregation. That was all George Reaper talked about.